I'll rewrite this story with original prose while maintaining the same length, narrative structure, and emotional arc. The mother who kept count. The morning my son arrived for Mother's Day, the Texas sun was already fierce by 10 o'clock. Harold carried a bouquet of yellow and white flowers, the kind you pick up at a grocery store on the way, still wrapped in cellophane. He set them on the kitchen table, kissed my cheek, and looked at me the way busy people look at things they feel guilty about briefly, carefully. "Mom," he said, settling into the chair across from me, "Linda's still sending the $4,000 every month, right? I just want to make sure you're comfortable." The words hit me somewhere behind my sternum. $4,000 every month. I pressed my palms flat against my apron. For 7 months, I had been heating soup from the food bank at First Methodist, stretching a fixed income across bills that never stopped growing, and quietly thanking God for neighbors who left extra bread on my porch without making a production of it. "The church helps me manage," I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. Harold's smile disappeared the way a cloud swallows sunlight, gradually, then all at once. Before either of us could say another word, the front door opened and Linda walked in. She had clearly come from somewhere that cost money. Her dress was pale silk, her heels made a deliberate sound on the hardwood, and her perfume arrived before she did, filling the small living room the way expensive things always fill modest spaces, without asking permission. She smiled at me. The smile was practiced and perfect, the kind that lives on the surface of a face without ever going deeper. "Mother," she said warmly. I said, "Linda. My name is Ruth Ann Calloway. I am 68 years old. I live in the house where Harold grew up, a small frame house on the edge of Beaumont, Texas, with a garden I have tended for 30 years and a kitchen that still smells like the apple butter I make every September. My husband Chester died of a stroke 6 years ago, and after that the house got quieter in ways I had not anticipated, not just in sound, but in the way time moves when there is only one person measuring it. Harold is 40 years old. He built a software company from a spare bedroom when he was 26, sold it at 31, started another one, and now employs over 200 people in a glass office building in Houston. I am proud of him in the way that costs something, because pride in a child who has outgrown you requires a kind of setting aside of yourself that nobody warns you about. He married Linda Marsh 7 years ago. She came from money, carried herself like someone who had never waited in a line, and treated me with the particular warmth that well-off people sometimes extend to those they consider beneath them, generous, carefully measured, and always reminding you of the distance. I had told myself I was imagining things. I had told myself this for 7 months. Standing in my own kitchen on Mother's Day, listening to my son ask if his wife was sending money I had never once received, I understood that I had not been imagining anything at all. After they left, I sat at the kitchen table until the light changed. The bouquet of grocery store flowers stood in a glass of water. Outside, a cardinal landed on the fence post and left again. I am a methodical person by nature. For 22 years, I worked as a bookkeeper for 3 different businesses in Beaumont, a hardware store, a dental practice, and a small property management company. Numbers were my language. I understood that the ledger does not lie, that the truth of any transaction lives in the record, patient and permanent, waiting to be found. I went to First Beaumont Savings the following Monday morning and sat across from a young teller named Grace. I asked her to pull every deposit and transfer into my account for the past 7 months. She checked twice. There was nothing, no transfers, no deposits larger than my Social Security payment and the small pension Chester had left me. The most notable entry was a $2.10 interest payment in March. I thanked her. I walked outside into the morning heat. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with the sun on my face, letting the information settle into the part of me that already knew. Then I walked home and opened the composition notebook I keep in the kitchen drawer. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote 2 words, "Find everything." I began keeping records that same afternoon. Every visit Linda paid, I logged it. Date, time, what she brought, what she said, what she did not say. She came every few weeks, always with something, a candle, a box of shortbread, once a pot of African violets that she admired while she was here and never mentioned again. She never brought an envelope. She never mentioned the money directly unless I brought it up, at which point she would arrange her expression into gentle concern and suggest that perhaps the transfer was delayed. Perhaps the bank was having trouble. Perhaps I was confused. She said this last part carefully, softly, as though she were being kind. Your memory isn't what it was, Mother. It happens to all of us eventually. I wrote it down, every word. I had kept household accounts for 40 years. I remembered every bill I had paid in the past 7 months, every coupon I had clipped, every evening I had chosen oatmeal over eggs because eggs cost more. My memory was fine. My memory was, in fact, the most dangerous thing in the room whenever Linda was in it, and she had apparently decided it was not. That was her first mistake. In late September, I called Harold's company on a Tuesday morning from the pay phone outside the post office. I asked to speak with someone in the accounting department regarding a personal matter. A woman named Patricia came on the line, cautious and professional. I told her I was trying to verify that the monthly transfers Harold made on my behalf were reaching me correctly. There was a pause. Mrs. Calloway, Patricia said carefully, I can confirm that automated transfers have gone out on the 15th of each month for the amount you mentioned. But I'm not able to confirm the recipient account details without authorization. What I can tell you is that the account the funds are directed to, it's registered under your name. Under my name, I repeated. Yes, ma'am. But if you're telling me you haven't received them, then the account number may not be the one you hold at your institution. I stood in the phone booth, with the receiver pressed to my ear, and the afternoon traffic passing behind me. An account in my name that was not mine. I thanked Patricia, hung up and stood very still for a moment. Then I walked to St. Matthew's Church 3 blocks away and sat in the last pew until the light through the stained glass moved across the floor, and my heartbeat slowed to something manageable. Reverend Haskell found me there an hour later. Ruth Ann, he said, sitting beside me without ceremony. You look like a woman carrying something heavy. I am, I said, but I think I've finally found a way to set it down. 3 days later, a man knocked on my door at 9 in the morning. He introduced himself as Gerald Whitmore, senior accountant at Calloway & Partners, Harold's firm. He was tall, somewhere in his early 60s, with the careful eyes of someone who has spent decades reading between the lines of financial documents. He had a briefcase. He set it on my kitchen table and opened it. Mrs. Calloway, he said, Patricia told me about your call. I hope you'll forgive me for coming without an invitation. I've been watching some irregularities in the company accounts for several months, and what you described confirmed something I've been reluctant to believe. He laid 7 statements on the table, side by side. Each one showed a transfer of $4,000. Each one listed the sender as Harold Calloway. Each one listed the recipient as Ruth Ann Calloway, but the account number printed at the bottom of each page was not mine. Gerald removed his glasses and set them on the table. The account was opened 18 months ago at a branch in River Oaks, he said. The application included a copy of your driver's license and a notarized form authorizing the account. The notarization appears to be forged. The account is controlled by your daughter-in-law. I looked at the papers for a long time. $28,000. 7 months. My name on an account I had never opened, collecting money my son believed was feeding me. There's more, Gerald said. He pulled out a second folder. Mrs. Calloway, Linda has also been using the company's secondary corporate card for personal expenses. We've been documenting it for 3 months. Spa services in the Woodlands. First-class travel to New York and Miami. Clothing and jewelry. The lease payments on a new vehicle. He slid a summary sheet toward me. The number at the bottom was $31,000. I sat with my hands flat on the table and breathed through my nose for a moment. Mr. Whitmore, I said, will you help me? He met my eyes. That's why I came. I contacted my college friend Dorothea Baxter the following morning. Dorothea had practiced family and financial law in Houston for 30 years and had the reputation of someone who did not lose cases she believed in. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, asked 4 precise questions, and said she would review Gerald's documents by end of week. "This is elder financial exploitation under the Texas Estates Code," she said. "Possibly criminal fraud as well, depending on what we find with the forged documents. Ruth Ann, this is not a gray area." "I know," I said, "but I want Harold to see it before anyone else does." Dorothea was quiet for a moment. "You want him to understand what happened before a judge tells him?" "Yes." "That's either very wise or very generous," she said. "Maybe both," I said. I planned the dinner carefully. I invited them for a Sunday in early October, telling Harold I had been missing him and wanted to cook a proper meal. Pot roast, the kind he had loved as a boy, with carrots and potatoes and biscuits made from scratch. I polished Chester's silverware. I ironed the good tablecloth. I set the table for 3 and placed a plain manila envelope in the center of the table, as though it were simply part of the arrangement. They arrived at 6. Harold wore a blue button-down and looked tired in the way that men in their 40s who work too hard always look tired. Linda wore a green dress that probably cost more than my monthly power bill. She brought a small bouquet of dahlias and set them down with the ease of someone who knows exactly how to enter a room. We ate. I let the conversation move through ordinary channels: Harold's company, the weather, the neighborhood, a family from my church whose daughter had just had twins. I refilled glasses and passed biscuits and let everything feel completely unremarkable. When the plates were mostly cleared, I set down my fork. "Linda," I said pleasantly, "I've been meaning to ask. When you send the money each month, what day do you usually arrange it?" She answered without thinking, the way people do when they haven't been on guard long enough. "The 12th, usually. Sometimes the 13th if the weekend falls wrong." Harold looked up. "I have the transfer set for the 15th. That's when payroll clears." The table went quiet. It was only a moment, 2 seconds, perhaps 3, but I watched Linda recalculate behind her eyes. She recovered quickly, laughing lightly and suggesting she must have misremembered, that she sometimes moved things around for convenience, that it all amounted to the same thing in the end. Harold frowned. "But if you're resending it on the 12th, where's the original going?" "I'm sure it's just a scheduling thing," Linda said smoothly, reaching for her wine. I smiled. "Well, I'll pop by the bank on the 16th just to confirm everything landed correctly." Linda's hand paused on her glass. "Of course," she said. "I'm sure it'll all be perfectly in order." Gerald attended the dinner. I had not mentioned this to either of them. He arrived as I was bringing out the pie, knocked politely, and came inside carrying a leather folder. Linda saw him and something shifted in her face, not fear yet, but the beginning of it. "Harold," Gerald said, "I'm sorry to interrupt. Your mother asked me to bring some documents. I think you need to see them tonight." Harold looked at me. "Gerald, what is this?" "Sit down, son," I said quietly. "Please." I laid the bank statements on the table one by one. 7 transfers, $4,000 each. Recipient listed as Ruth Ann Calloway. Account number that was not mine. I laid the credit card statements beside them. Spa, hotels, airlines, a vehicle lease. Harold picked up the first statement and read it. He read it again. He set it down and picked up the next one. He went through all 7 without speaking. When he looked up at Linda, his face was something I had never seen on him before, not anger, not grief, but the specific expression of a person watching a world they believed in rearrange itself into something unrecognizable. "Clara," he said. He had called her by the wrong name, Linda, but I understood the impulse. He was looking at a stranger. She began to cry. The tears came quickly and fluently, the way tears do when they have been practiced. She reached for his hand. She said she had only borrowed it, that she had intended to replace it. That she had been under so much pressure, that he never understood how difficult it was to manage everything, that his mother had never truly accepted her, that she had been trying to hold everything together, and sometimes that required. Harold pulled his hand back. "You forged her signature," he said. "It wasn't like that. You opened an account in her name." I was going to explain. "She's been going to the food bank." His voice broke on the last word, quietly, like something thin snapping underfoot. "Linda, she's been accepting charity from her church because she thought the money wasn't coming through, because you told her it was her memory." Linda's crying shifted in register, less fluid now, more desperate. She looked at me. I looked back at her without moving. "Mother," she said. "No," I said gently, "not tonight." She left shortly after. Not dramatically. She gathered her things with shaking hands and walked out, and we heard her car start and pull away, and then the house was quiet. Harold sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I made tea and set it in front of him and sat across from him, the way I used to sit across from him when he was 16, and had made some mistake he didn't know how to explain. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." "I know. I should have checked. I should have asked. I trusted her to handle things because it was easier, and he stopped. You were fooled by someone who was very skilled at fooling people," I said. "That's not the same as being a fool." He was quiet. "The question," I said, "is what you do now." Dorothea filed the civil case 2 weeks later. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in November, in a courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Jefferson County Courthouse. I wore a gray dress and sensible shoes. Dorothea wore black and moved through the room with the confidence of someone who had done this many times. Linda sat at the defendant's table with a lawyer I didn't recognize, young, slightly disheveled, the look of someone who had been hired in a hurry. She wore a dark suit. She had arranged her face into an expression of dignified injury. Harold sat in the gallery, 3 rows back. He had not spoken to Linda since the dinner. He looked like a man who had lost 20 pounds in a month. Dorothea presented the case methodically. Bank statements, the fraudulent account application, the forged notarization, credit card records, Gerald's testimony, my composition notebook, which she held up and described page by page. Linda's lawyer argued that it was a misunderstanding, a family financial arrangement that had been miscommunicated. He suggested, as gently as he could manage, that an elderly woman's recollection of financial matters was not always reliable. Dorothea did not raise her voice. "Mrs. Calloway was a professional bookkeeper for 22 years, she said. The journal she kept during this period documents 41 separate dates, times, and verbatim conversations with the defendant. Every entry she made has been independently corroborated by bank records, security footage, and witness testimony. If this is what memory loss looks like, I'd encourage us all to aspire to it." The judge reviewed everything carefully. He asked Gerald several specific questions about the account documentation. He asked me one question directly, whether I had authorized anyone to open a secondary account in my name. "No, sir," I said, "I did not." He ruled the following afternoon. Linda was ordered to repay the full $28,000. She was prohibited from accessing or managing any financial accounts belonging to Harold for a period of 4 years. She was required to complete a financial accountability program. The gavel came down. I did not feel what I expected to feel. I felt very tired and very sad and strangely peaceful all at once. Harold drove me home from the courthouse. We didn't talk much. He pulled into the driveway and sat with the engine running for a moment. "I don't know what to do next," he said. "Nobody does," I said. "That's not as unusual as it feels right now." He nodded. "Come by on Saturday," I said. "I want to show you something." The something was St. Matthew's basement. 2 months earlier, Reverend Haskell and I had begun talking about a resource center for older adults in the county who were dealing with financial exploitation, people who had been manipulated by family members, who had signed documents they didn't understand, who were too ashamed or too frightened to ask for help. Dorothea had agreed to provide pro bono legal consultations 1 morning a month. Gerald had offered to review financial documents. 3 retired women from my Bible study had volunteered to staff an intake desk. We called it the Steady Ground Project. When Harold walked into the basement that Saturday, there were 6 folding tables, 2 borrowed computers, a donated printer, and a corkboard with a hand-painted sign that read, "You are not alone, and this is not your fault." He stood in the doorway and looked at it all for a long moment. "You built this," he said. "We built it," I said. "There are about 12 of us." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Can I help?" I handed him a stack of intake forms that needed to be organized and pointed him toward the table in the corner. He sat down and got to work. He came back the next Saturday, and the one after that. He started handling our bookkeeping, which had been done on a yellow legal pad by a well-meaning woman from church who was the first to admit she was in over her head. He set up a proper accounting system. He wrote a small grant application to a foundation in Austin that funds senior services programs. He drove 2 women from our intake list to hearings downtown and waited in the hallway while Dorothea represented them inside. People change slowly, and then all at once. I watched Harold change the slow way day by day, Saturday by Saturday, one small choice at a time. One afternoon in February, I found him at the corner table eating a sandwich and reading through a case file someone had left for Dorothea. He didn't notice me for a moment. He was focused and still, and he looked like himself, not the version of himself that had been performing success for an audience, but the boy who used to sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I cooked dinner, content with the quiet. "Harold," I said. He looked up. "You're good at this," I said. He thought about it. "I think I'm just finally doing something that matters." "That's what being good at something usually feels like," I said. Spring came back around the way it always does in Southeast Texas. Sudden and absolute, the air going soft overnight, and the garden taking off before you've fully decided it's time. I planted more lavender along the back fence. The African violets Linda had brought the previous spring were still alive on the windowsill, which surprised me and seemed like the right kind of surprise. One morning in April, a letter arrived from the Texas Association of Senior Services. The Steady Ground Project had been selected as a regional model program. They wanted to feature our work in their quarterly publication and send a representative to observe our intake process. I read the letter twice, then set it on the kitchen table and poured myself a cup of tea. Chester's photograph was on the shelf above the window, the one from our 25th anniversary, where we were both squinting into the sun and laughing about something neither of us could remember afterward. I looked at it the way I had gotten in the habit of looking at it, not with grief exactly, more with the conversational feeling of wanting to share something. "You would like this," I thought. "You would say it's about time someone paid attention." I folded the letter and put it in the drawer with the composition notebook, which I had filled up completely by December and replaced with a new one, plain green cover, which I was already a quarter of the way through. On the first Saturday in May, Harold came by in the morning with coffee and a box of KOLACHES from the Czech bakery on 11th Street, which he had learned was my particular weakness. We sat on the back porch in the early warmth, watching the garden and not talking about anything consequential. After a while he said, "Mom, do you ever regret it? The whole thing? Going to court, all of it?" I thought about the question honestly. "No," I said. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret a lot of the pain in the middle of it. But the decision itself, no." "I regret things," he said. "A lot of them." "I know." "I keep thinking about all those months," he said. "You were here and you were, I didn't know, but I also didn't check. I trusted her to handle it and I didn't ask because it was easier not to ask, and that's its own kind of." "Harold," I said. He stopped. "You can carry that if you want to," I said. "Some of it is yours to carry, but don't carry it so long that it becomes the whole story of who you are. You're here now. You've been here every Saturday. That's real." He nodded slowly. A mockingbird landed on the fence post and ran through 6 different songs in 45 seconds the way mockingbirds do, showing off, delighted with itself. Harold watched it, I forgot how loud spring is down here. You've been living in glass buildings too long. He laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere uncomplicated, and I thought, there he is. The boy I knew, not lost after all, just temporarily misplaced, the way things get when life moves too fast and nobody stops to check the ledger. That evening after Harold left, I sat at the kitchen table with the green composition notebook open in front of me. The window was cracked and the garden smell came through, and somewhere down the street someone was grilling and the smoke drifted past pleasantly. I wrote for a while. Updates on the Steady Ground project, notes on a case we'd been working on, a reminder about the grant deadline. Then I paused and looked out the window at the darkening yard. I thought about Linda, which I still did occasionally. I had heard through Gerald that she had left Houston. I didn't know where she had gone or what she was doing. I found that I didn't wish her poorly. I didn't wish her anything in particular, which is its own kind of peace, the absence of wishing, the quiet that comes when a wound has finally closed over and left only a scar, useful and permanent, a record of what happened without the pain. I wrote one more line before I closed the notebook. What was taken from me bought something more valuable, clarity about what matters, and the courage to say so. I put the cap on the pen, closed the book, and blew out the candle on the table. The darkness outside was soft and warm, full of crickets and the last of the mockingbird's evening repertoire. I was 68 years old. I had outlasted a theft, a silence, a loneliness, and a legal proceeding, and I had built something out of the rubble of all of it, and my son came every Saturday, and the lavender was coming in strong, and the Steady Ground project had helped 11 families since January. I was not who I had been a year ago. I was better in the ways that cost something. That, I thought, as I walked down the hall to bed, was enough. It was, in fact, considerably more than enough.